Yo, what's up? This is called The Grace of Changing Your Mind. So let's dive into it. I have seen this 2016 trend going on all over social media. We've all seen it, throwbacks from 2016. But also, I did participate in this challenge. My hair was a crazy shade of red. And my outfits consisted of like weird knit tops with ill-fitting shorts, denim shorts over tights with motorcycle boots. I just dressed like all over the place at that time. Don't dress like that anymore. But I love how adventurous that version of me was. That trend made me think about how many times over these last 10 years I have had to fundamentally change who I am to become the person I am today. I love that girl dearly. That old version of me was so cool, but that version of me wanted to like not get a job and just attend rock concerts. That girl, unfortunately, she dated a lot of rap boys and went days without brushing her hair, which now I can't live without my shark styler. I might sound very basic in this video, and I'm apologizing right now, but also not, because that ties into the theme today. But if she could see that version of me, she'd be so disappointed. And that's fine, because I am very much more of like a stereotypical human being than that girl ever was. I work a very normal job that I love, and I married a stable guy who does not reek of cigarettes. I openly admit to loving things like the Wicked musical, whereas before I would have quietly admired Wicked. If you saw me reading in public, I'd be reading like Dostoevsky and quoting some Russian literature or something. That version of me only drank whiskey on the rocks. This version of me primarily drinks white wine. But the thing is, in these last 10 years, I have learned so much about myself, and it's caused me to change my mind on a lot. And in this life, I do believe that having firm beliefs and morals is extremely important. But I also believe that allowing yourself to change your mind about things is one of the roads to optimal happiness in this life. The cultural pressure to be consistent. This part is a bit dense, so I'm going to be reading partially. Consistency is often treated as credibility. And it makes sense, right? The worst thing is when we find out a friend has different faces for different people, or we find out a celebrity we loved said something really harmful in public, or they're just not the sort of person that we thought that they were. Stability and consistency is important when it comes to assessing someone's character, because they show us what holds when nothing is being watched. Anyone can perform conviction in moments of clarity or intensity, but character reveals itself in repetition. It comes out in how someone responds across different times or moods or circumstances. Consistency isn't about never changing your mind. It's about having a recognizable center, a sense that your values don't disappear the second it becomes inconvenient to hold them. Stability gives us something to lean on. It builds trust not through grand declarations, but through predictability of care, of effort, of presence. When someone is stable, you know how they tend to treat people. You know what they return to when things are uncertain. That steadiness creates safety. Not because it's rigid, but because it is dependable. So something started shifting in my own life when I graduated from college. I started working as a marketer at a company. My boss there was basically an influencer. And I started witnessing just how many opportunities she got in her life just from being someone who was very open and personable and easy to connect to, while also being like conventionally attractive. Around this time also, I started dating the man who would then become my husband. He was the first stable guy I ever dated and had like a boring job in the financial world. First, I didn't think the relationship had any legs, but obviously here we are today. It was another kind of dipping my toe moment into the world of normalcy. Things started shifting slowly. I stopped box bleaching my hair every 6 weeks, and I started getting highlights and kind of being like a sandy blonde. How I am now, I guess. I slowly moved away from wearing band t-shirts and what my friends called my pilgrim dresses that I would pair with combat boots. I began wearing little black dresses and kitten heels. Then suddenly, instead of only surrounding myself with a small group of alternative people, I started connecting with tons of people who previously I would have thought were way too basic to hang out with. What I realized was that a lot of these people were no less interesting than me or my friends. They just presented themselves to the world in a way that made them blend in more. It made me realize that I was wearing a lot of my personality on my sleeve, making myself look and sound very interesting to the world and taking a lot of pride in that. Whereas other people were no less interesting than myself, they were just keeping their cards closer to their chest unknowingly. Don't get me wrong, okay? I think treating your body as a museum and creating a unique style is incredibly cool and interesting, and it's still kind of what I gravitate more towards, but it doesn't hold as much importance as I once assigned to it. There's power to sticking out, but there's also power to sticking to conventional norms. Both are good. And as a 22-year-old, this notion was both liberating and profound. My boyfriend loved me in any form, but he did convince me to put away the cigarettes and the long walks and instead trade it for protein shakes and lifting at the gym. I could not believe I was becoming one of those girls. And yeah, slowly but surely, I started putting on muscle, and I also started feeling stronger and more capable and more attractive than I ever did when I was super skinny and smoking cigarettes. I saw the life that my boss was living, how she owned a house in Lisbon, how when we got on our Zoom calls, one day she would be logging on from Cape Town and the next Costa Rica. I started seeing money as something that could provide freedom and change lives instead of something that I just didn't care to trade my time for. Changing your mind as a form of integrity. My mind was changing, and I could see the way it started to bother some of my longtime friends. During this time, a lot of my friends had moved away right after college, and they were keeping up with my life through Instagram posts or infrequent calls. There were other people who were still in New York with me and were also noticing some sort of shifts. And to be honest, it seemed to cause a bit of grief to people. Cool alternative Eve who wanted to be a groupie and wore tons of cheetah print and smoked Marlboro Reds and said how she never ever wanted to have a boyfriend was now normal. And this idea of changing your mind goes far beyond the identity crisis I had at 22. It's just probably the most pivotal time in my life that I can use as an example for this. So just anecdotally, that's what I'm using. But I know that this can appear in much greater circumstances. We see this with religion or political affiliation or so many important aspects of life. Maybe you went through a huge breakup or just moved to a new city and you're feeling tons of key parts of yourself starting to shift. Maybe you're feeling those shifts start to drive away some people in your life, and maybe you're feeling less pulled to things that used to really move you. Whatever it is, in those moments, all you can do is be a witness to yourself, to honor every feeling flowing through you, free of judgment. Change is one of the best opportunities we have in life to continuously keep moving towards truer forms of ourselves, and a life that's most aligned to us as our life shifts and our surroundings shift, and the context of the world shifts, and the truest version of ourselves change with time. What feels really powerful for me to pursue right now is probably going to feel like something I've completely outgrown in 5 years. A person can change and still remain deeply consistent if the way they listen or reflect and the way they take responsibility remains intact. So in that sense, stability isn't the absence of change, it's the continuity of the character beneath it. The emotional cost of staying the same. There is absolutely an emotional cost in shifting key parts of your life, but there's an even greater emotional cost in staying the same. Oftentimes we perform what for certain will make sense in our day-to-day lives when pursuing curiosity would feel truer. Rigidity can feel like confidence on the outside when it's really just holding us back. Social consequences of fundamental change. Yes, we touched on this earlier, but we will dive deeper right now. It is the biggest hurdle in discovering the new you and will be 100% the biggest thing holding you back. People will likely refer to the old version of you in a romanticized way. It took me years to see this taper off with some of my longtime friends, but with the ones who matter and stick around long term, their new idea of you will eventually begin to crystallize, and they will honor that new you. There is grief in no longer being easily understood, and as I mentioned, it will take time for that new understanding to find its footing. You will lose people, you will find people, and you will also find new versions of your old friends who travel with you to different times in your life. Give people the grace to catch up, but Also, try not to over-explain yourself and your evolution, because it is an evolution. We all have our different paths. I found liberation in becoming more basic. But there's also someone who has spent their entire life fitting into societal norms and only found their truest self when they started box dyeing their hair or going a crazy red color and wearing a garter belt. Taste, desire, and subtle shift. So much about diving deeper into newer versions of yourself comes back to noticing and allowing yourself to notice. Taste is usually the first place that change shows up because it doesn't ask for permission. This is another place where I'm going to read and talk because it's a little dense. Before we can articulate a new belief or name a shift in values, we begin to feel drawn to different things. A different kind of book, a different kind of conversation, a room that feels calmer than the ones we used to love. These preferences don't arrive with explanations attached. They simply appear as subtle gravitations. We notice them in passing, often without trusting them yet. Language tends to lag behind because words demand clarity, and change is rarely clear at first. It lives in impressions and moods, in what feels right long before we know why. That's why taste can feel confusing during periods of growth. We're responding honestly, but without a narrative to support it. Over time, language catches up. We learn how to explain what we are already moving towards. But the movement itself begins quietly, in what we choose without having to justify it. But attraction is often mistaken for instruction. This is a huge fault that I notice in myself and my own beliefs. Attraction is often mistaken for instruction, as if every pull towards something means we should pursue it fully or immediately. But attraction is better understood as information. It tells us what resonates, what reflects something unfolding inside of us, without insisting that we act on it. We can observe without obeying it. When we treat attraction as information, we allow ourselves to be curious rather than reactive. We can ask why something draws us in, what it mirrors back to us, and whether it belongs in our lives or simply wants to be acknowledged. This creates the space between feeling and action, a space where discernment lives. Not everything we're drawn to is meant to be kept. Some things are just passing signals, reminders of who we are becoming, not directives of what we must do next. Oh, I really did well with that sentence, and I'm just calling it out because I think this idea is really important, so I'm just going to say it one more time. Some things are just passing signals, reminders of who we are becoming, not directives for what we must do next. The grace part. I have so much grace for so many different versions of myself, not just my punk persona. I have always followed my heart really well and let it take me on different whims. So I'm grateful for the grace I've given myself to explore, but I haven't always given myself grace in the insecurities that manifest from those changes. Like during this era in my early 20s, I'd be so comfortable and like fine with myself reading like girl boss books alone in my room. I know it's so cringy now, but you just had to be there, okay? And then like if I was on the subway and someone saw me reading a girl boss book, oh my God, I would be mortified. I would be absolutely mortified. I had zero grace for like the feelings I had when others caught me in moments of, I don't know, just trying different things. And see, that's the great part about getting older, because now I'm like, who cares? But these things do feel really important when you're younger. So yeah, give yourself grace. All right, so why is this important at all? Well, because I think changing your mind and allowing plasticity to exist in your life is a lifelong skill. Oh my God, there are tons of coyotes out my window right now, and they sound crazy. If you've never heard the sound of a coyote, look it up. It is like the creepiest thing ever. I live by quite a bit of nature in LA, and it's mating season right now, and it sounds like a horror movie every single night. So anyway, so I wonder if you guys can hear this right now. Probably not, because I have a mic, but it's getting crazy out there. Anyway, back to the closing remarks. Changing your mind or key parts of yourself doesn't mean that you are weak of mind or impressionable. It also doesn't indicate that you don't know yourself. I think it's actually completely the opposite. How cool is it that you can trust yourself to update your thinking? There's a comfort in permanence, in believing that we can decide who we are and, rest there indefinitely. But openness asks something different of us. It asks us to stay receptive, to allow ourselves to be shaped by experience, context, time. It doesn't demand constant change, just the availability to it. Choosing openness doesn't mean living without values or direction. It means holding them with enough flexibility to allow them to mature. It's a willingness to revise versus defend, to listen rather than double down. Openness creates a kind of emotional spaciousness, one where curiosity can coexist with conviction, and where identity is lived and not locked in. And in that way, openness becomes a practice of trust. Trust in yourself to adapt without losing your center. And honestly, some ideas aren't meant to be resolved, especially the ones about becoming. A conclusion implies finality, a sense that something has been decided or closed. But growth rarely moves in that way. It unfolds in cycles and chapters and can be incredibly confusing. And the cheesy takeaway from this, maybe the point is not to arrive at the final version of ourselves at all. I'm sorry. It's all about the climb. You don't owe permanence to the person you once were, or clarity to anybody watching. You're allowed to revise yourself gently or violently as often as life asks you to. Not everything has to be decided, and change doesn't have to feel dramatic. Not everything needs to be named, and that is the beauty of life, baby. I adore that red-haired girl. Do I think she'd adore me in the same way? Probably not. But I'm exactly who I should be in this part of my life, and I adore the way I live my life. And you know what? I can't wait to see how that shifts when I'm 30 or 45 or 75. I don't know how to end this now except saying that yes, once again, it's the beauty of life, and we are so lucky to change. We are so lucky to be able to change a million times. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this new video, and I will talk to you very soon.